So you've been thinking about acoustic treatment and heard about something called absorption. What is absorption? Good question. Well, it just so happens I recently did some acoustic treatments to my home studio, and in this video, I'll share what I learned about absorption. Now, I had the idea that sound from my guitar would travel directly right into the microphone. So, to make a recording, I thought all I'd need to do would be to just kind of play into the microphone as if the microphone was listening to my guitar. And while it's true, sound is traveling directly to the microphone, it's also true that sound is really kind of exploding, going out in all directions and bouncing around the room. So yeah, I'm generating sound by strumming my guitar, but the mic is really hearing sound as it's shaped by the size and acoustics of the room. Now, every room is going to have its own unique acoustic characteristics, so every room will need its own unique acoustic treatments. So this is very much not a one-size-fits-all kind of thing. Now, in this diagram, we'll talk about three kinds of sound, starting with direct sound. This is sound that travels directly from a source to a microphone without encountering any physical objects along the way. In addition to direct sound, there are early reflections, sometimes referred to as sound from the first reflection point. Early reflections are picked up by the microphone after direct sound. And in addition to early reflections, there are late reflections. This is sound bouncing all around the room and picked up by the microphone after the early reflections. So yeah, lots of sound bouncing around, right? Now, in this diagram, we're looking at how sound is traveling from the perspective of the source. Let's change perspective and look at the same diagram from the perspective of the microphone. Now, as you would expect, the first sound picked up by the microphone is direct sound. The next sound picked up by the microphone are the early reflections, and the late reflections are picked up by the microphone after the early reflections. So it's like this. Sound from the source is produced in one instance, but then that same sound is repeatedly picked up by the microphone at different times. And this timing thing is known as latency, meaning that late reflections are picked up after early reflections, and early reflections are picked up after direct sound. So this is why you end up getting echo effects in a recording. Diffusion and something called absorption are two of the most common acoustic treatments. In this video, we'll talk about absorption. Now, when sound collides with a surface, part of the sound is absorbed by the surface material, and part of the sound is reflected. So the idea behind absorption is to increase the amount of sound absorbed in order to decrease the amount of sound being reflected. And since absorbed sound has less energy than direct sound, it will have less presence in a recording. And this means you'll get less of an echo effect. Have you ever walked outside after a big snowstorm? If so, you may remember a kind of hushed feeling in the atmosphere, a kind of quietness. Well, this is because a big blanket of snow has just covered the ground and is basically absorbing the outdoor sounds that you would normally hear. A side note, if you're watching from a more tropical area, you'll just have to trust me on this. So what kind of absorption treatments are available? Well, you have a number of options. There are acoustic blankets, acoustic panels, various acoustic foams, and bass traps, to name a few. And of course, some folks do DIY absorption. A special note on bass traps. Now, in my research for this video, I noticed many folks seem to stress the importance of bass traps. Turns out low-frequency sound tends to resonate in the corners of a room, and low-frequency sound can be problematic in your recording. So if you're interested in the how and why of this, it's something you can dive into and learn about. For this video, let's just say bass traps are designed to trap low frequency sound that resonates in the corners of a room. So assuming you decide to acoustically treat your home studio with absorption, The next question is, where do I put it? And this brings up the notion of reflection points. So what are reflection points and why do I need to know about them? So you can think of reflection points as certain places in a room that would cause sound to bounce back into the room. And needless to say, finding reflection points in a carefully drawn diagram, a whole lot easier than finding reflection points in a room. For this video, let's just say every room has reflection points and they very much affect how sound is recorded. In this diagram, we can pretty easily see what is often referred to as the first reflection point. And if you want to know more about reflection points, you can find lots of information on YouTube and the internet. And as the name implies, there are other reflection points in a room. And again, in this diagram, it's easy enough to see where other reflection points would be. So these are the places where you would want to install acoustic treatment, right? It makes sense. In this video, we'll focus on the first reflection points. Let's imagine we installed acoustic blankets on the first reflection points. Direct sound, not affected. And as you can see, early and late reflections are absorbed. Now, from the perspective of the microphone, looks like this. No change to direct sound. However, because of the acoustic blankets, the microphone is now picking up weakened reflective sound. And this will reduce the amount of echo when recording in the room. So there are many factors to consider when it comes to acoustic treatment. Room size, reflection points, microphone position, various microphone settings, diffusion, absorption, bass traps. And when it comes to diffusion and absorption, it's not an either-or kind of decision. As a matter of fact, I noticed it was often the case that folks used a combination of absorption and diffusion. And as you may have guessed, yeah, I have a diffusion video as well. You may want to check it out. So after giving the matter some thought, here's where I landed. Got an acoustic blanket, put bass traps up in the corners, and did a little DIY. Hung a thick comforter blanket on one bare wall. And this cost $105. So yeah, I decided to start with absorption, and after I get some mixing experience with this setup, I'll reassess, maybe add a diffuser. Yeah, we'll see. Word of caution though, anybody who's addicted to bubble wrap, someone who just can't pass it by, they got to stop and pop a few bubbles, but then proceeds to flatten the whole sheet. They just can't stop. Doing acoustic treatment was a little bit like that for me. Once I started, I kept on thinking of ways to do more DIY, more panels, more foam, do the ceiling, do the floors, block the windows, right? Sound bouncing off glass, can't be good. But the problem with that is too much treatment begins to dull, and really deaden the sound that's in the room. So I finally realized I had to look for some kind of balance between the amount of echo I'd like to remove from the room with the amount of echo I'd like to keep in the room. So I backed off a little bit and actually did remove some treatment. So comment, like, subscribe, and check out the links below. I posted 2 videos from Graham's Recording Revolution channel, both about acoustic treatment, good information. And with that, we'll see you next time.